everybody. Welcome to this seminar on the women's movements in Asia building peace. So today is the July 7th, and so it is also happens to be the date when the Japanese army invaded Beijing with the Lu Gongqiao incident. And so I think it is also very apt for us to be having this seminar today to talk about peace, especially because now we are seeing different forces coming, different tensions that are threatening, seriously threatening peace in this region. And 22 years ago, we had the NGO Forum on Women in Beijing in 1995. And 1 year before the forum, we had the East Asian Women's Forum held in Japan to prepare for the NGO Forum. And in that forum, we had actually very dynamic women's groups coming together, discussing with each other, talking about issues. And I remember that at that time, Arena was also very much involved. We had with Yori, Matsui, Seiko Hanochi, with a lot of women. We prepared actually 2 books that we presented at the NGO Forum in 1995. That one, the one on resurgent patriarchy and the one on shadows behind the screen. So 23 years have elapsed since then. And if we look at the situation of the women's movement today, then we find that well, there are a lot of achievements, a lot of things that are being taken up by different women's groups on very specific themes, very down to the ground. But at the same time, then there is so much we need to be taking up because of the aggravating situations of violence, of threat of war around the world, and now recently in the last year or so in East Asia. So that is also why we have come together today, and we have invited some of the prominent representatives of women's groups in this region. And so today we hope to share on the work that we've done and also come up with possible ways in which we could strengthen the networks and strengthen our collaboration. So I would, we will be conducting this as a dialogue in different rounds. So for the first round, I would like to invite the speakers to tell us about your reflection or your review of the achievements of women's movements or in the last 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, so that we have some sense of where we are now. So can I invite maybe Watanabe Mina to speak? She came last night and she's leaving tomorrow. She's come specifically for this forum, and we thank you for that.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Hello everyone, my name is Mina Watanabe, and I came, as Kiu Chi explained, I came from Nanjing yesterday evening because with the same schedule, I had a seminar on Kung Fu Women issue or Japan's military sexual slavery, and also the meeting how to address this issue, and also meeting on the UNESCO Memory of the World, which we nominated Kung Fu Women documents to be registered. And first of all, I'd like to thank Kiu Chi and everybody to hold this session after 3 days intensive talk and discussions. And I'm glad I can join this time today because it is first time for me to participate arena-related forum. But I guess my former boss, mentor and a friend, Lady Yori Matsui, had participated from the beginning. And this time, Muto-san recommended me to come. to rebuild kind of a network with Asian countries and Asian organizations and individuals. And I'm very glad I'm here today. And before, just briefly explain, because I distribute this brochure. I am working as a Secretary General for the Women's Active Museum on War and Peace, based in Tokyo, in Japan. And this is a museum to especially focus on violence against women in war and conflict situations, and particular focus on Kung Fu women issue. And this museum has first proposed by Yayori again, because in order to pass the record and testimony to the next generation, especially in perpetrating country Japan. And it's opened in 2005, so already 12 years. I think 12 years running by donation and membership, especially by Japanese people, is something I think, somebody said miracle, because in a situation where in a religionistic and nationalistic situation, but at the same time it tells that there are people in Japan who are really trying to face up to these crimes and the wrongdoing in the wartime. And today, another paper that I distribute, this is a Kung Fu station map. We created, we kind of get together all the documents from testimonies, soldiers' memorial, and official documents and witnesses' testimony. And you will see how the military set up Kung Fu station all over Asia Pacific region, almost wherever they invaded. And it is a bit difficult for me to say the achievement at this point on the issue of Kung Fu women issue, because the first survivor came forward in 1991, and in 1993 the government of Japan basically admitted the involvement of the military to setting up Kung Fu stations, but always with some denials. And now, after the first Abe administration from 2007, at the time he said there's no forceful recruitment of women. And afterwards, it's the recognition or acknowledgement becoming worse and worse. And now, officially, the government of Japan saying in the international setting, and saying that the Kung Fu women are not sex slaves. And there's no coercion, there's no forceful recruitment of women. This is second. And the third, the number of the victims has been said 200,000 is groundless. So they are trying to deny the magnitude of the Kung Fu women system, and also what happened, the sexual enslavement of women itself is denied, and also the beginning of the recruitment also denied in many ways. So so it sounds very I feel very pessimistic if I talk about domestic situation, but I like to stress in terms of the Kiu Chi mentioned today about 1995 Beijing conference, and we have talked a lot about violence against women in war and conflict situation that time, because there were, of course, the women survivor of the Kung Fu women came forward and talked about what happened to them and demanded justice. And also there were a lot of conflicts. For example, in the former Yugoslavia and from Rwanda, and women were raped whenever the war happened. And in 1990s was a time that violence against women in war was really recognized through the survivors' testimonies. And why women are raped when war happened is something that one of the recognition achieved was because after the war, even though the rape in war is crime, but never tried after the war post-war tribunals. So that was a kind of recognition in the platform for action in Beijing too. And afterwards, you know, the UN established the special tribunal for former Yugoslavia, for Rwanda, and also the International Criminal Court established. And in the Rome Statute, it says that rape and sexual slavery in wartime is also war crime and crimes against humanity. That was one of the achievements that explicitly stated in the statute. But the challenge is always, it's so difficult to implement and make the criminals accountable for for the crimes. For Kung Fu Women issue also, it is very important to name who was the responsible person for setting up the sexual slavery system. We know the soldiers who talked about rape. We know the soldiers who built comfort stations. But who ordered those to build it? Who ordered to collect women? Those responsible ones have not tried. So that's the reason why we hold the International War Crimes Tribunal on Japan's military sexual slavery in the year 2000. It was a people's tribunal, fully by the civil society, but it's a very much a big meaning to naming who was responsible, including Emperor Hirohito. So the 2000 was something that the tribunals can be one of the achievement too. But and internationally, due to the continuing actions by the victim survivors of Kung Fu Women, they suffered 50, 60, 70 years ago of sexual violence they have suffered. Means, I remember when we had a conference in Thailand that the women from Afghanistan were participating in the session. I think it was 2004. And she said it is very difficult for women in Afghanistan to talk about sexual violence at this point. And they say justice is something luxury. But at the same time, because we are working on violence against women, happened 50 years ago, 60 years ago. So they can hope when the peace comes to Afghanistan, they can talk about, or they can talk about their suffering. Because after 50 or 60 years later, also without peace, they can't talk about sexual violence. And without peace, there's no way they can talk to police. They can talk to the UN members, or even the women's movement is very difficult to make the crime clear and make the perpetrator accountable in insecure situation. So in that sense, I think the Kung Fu Women issue have kind of set a precedent. Anytime, this is a crimes against humanity. You can talk about this crime and you can claim justice when the time comes, when the peace comes. So that maybe can be one of the achievements I can say now, internationally. Thank you.
Thank you. So can I pass the microphone to Jung, please?
Yeah. Thank you, Mina, for all those kind of efforts. I have my vivid memory with Matsui Yayori in '95 Beijing Women's Caucus. and also in 2000 Beijing Plus. At that year, she was very busy and organized many meetings in Hyderabad and also in New York. And she was so active, so I didn't realize she had a serious problem inside. But she has stimulated us. I heard her vivid memory, so which were in this brochure that why not for us to build international solidarity? Why only cooperative sectors are globalized? So, and also another comment is that we Japanese women's groups are very diligent in study, and but Korean women's group are very always do some kind of a campaign. So if both of our women's organization can cooperate, it will make a big synergy. So I think some kind of wish has been accomplished with this kind of map and the museum, and also with the Korean women's activities. Wednesday meeting in front of Japanese embassy, it has passed over 10,000. So if you imagine there are 52 weeks in a year, and more than 1,000 means it has continued every Wednesday. So it became a peace class in East Asia. So at first it was kind of some victimized trauma sharing, but later on it became more peace open class for everybody. And then most of the victims, so-called comfort women or sexual slavery, they break out the silence. So that breaking out the silence is, as Toksu has already made certain very peculiar and mysterious pictures. They couldn't find there any vocabulary or any word to share their trauma. So when we tried to interview them, they couldn't find any word what to say, what not to say. So it was silenced. So from 1945 to 95, you can calculate how many years have passed. So during those kind of years, their trauma have been silenced. So, but with the feminist intervention, they are assured to say something. So it is a kind of solidarity building with the feminist discourse. Your trauma is not your sin. So your trauma is related with some kind of state injustice or something. That kind of persuasion made them brave to share their inner trauma. So now they became very active activists. So they didn't not only talk about their own trauma, they also talk about the victims of Rwanda case and the victims of any other war victims, not only victims. So they received many so-called comfort money from Korean government and or some civil society support. And they donated whole money, usually for, I was owed some of the money. I have worked with the KISS, Korean House for International Solidarity. We are one of the most poorest NGO, and one of the big seed money came from that harmonious donation. So they have donated their money to the poor and but politically correct NGO activities. And at first they donated only for Korean movement organization. Now they made it a butterfly fund, and they donated for Africa and Asian countries. So it is a kind of big, I can share this kind of accomplishment, but of course, many of, like Mina, and many of good Japanese organizations, they also contributed a lot. So it is a kind of very successful international solidarity building. I always remember Yayoi's last sayings. So her last saying is trying to set up war museum and dig out her story, which were buried by his story for a long time. So, and I think Kimchi's PeaceWomen activities also dig out her story, who have contributed a lot to make this earth at least sustainable. So I think it is related to us from each women's organization's activities are related with. And when we are coming up with this kind of result, the various sectors, at first Beijing Women's Forum started with the global caucus. And then many of Korean women's organization participants didn't have any global experience. At that time, our Musha has organized, he is one of the very peculiar men who were in the Beijing Women's Conference. After the conference, I wrote a newspaper column. I saw a very gentleman, Japanese gentleman, who organized a caucus on trafficking women's issue. It was shocking for Korean men. So it was one of my impression was that for the Beijing Women's Conference, and the Ed was there, and Arena has organized a space for that. And then many of women from Korea, they are encouraged by this kind of global support. And they, after coming back to Korea, they want to more gender-friendly state for Korea to be like that. So gender mainstreaming agenda has been imprinted and implemented in Korea, and we try our every effort, legislation, and also let any women, biologically women, to be in filmmaker, in university professor, or in parliamentarian, or ministerial position, so even in military sector. So one of our mainstreamization agenda tried to let the women go in. So, and then later on, we want to that biological women to be political women. So we starting with the biological representation. At least it is going to be a cultural model for younger generation. And then later on, we try to, women's group try to continuously working with those women should be more politically representative of women's agenda. And so that's why the women's agenda became our how to develop women's agenda for more sustainable vision. So for that, many women, we started our mainstreamization strategy from the top to grassroots. So nowadays, at the first we starting with the like Emily list. We made a women's list. At the first, when we approached the party members, their answer is like that. We want to recommend women as a parliament candidate, but there is no women who have prepared for that kind of such an important position. So we are quickly organized our group and making a 100 women's list who are not contaminated with the existing existing political corruption, and also who have worked very hard. And we made 100 women's list and distributed to all the parliament members. So starting with that kind of affirmative action campaign, And later on, we applied this kind of affirmative action campaign to grassroots level, also to all the committee in government bureaucratic setting, and even university. For example, the Department of Economics, there is no women faculty members, so we want to, this kind of affirmative system spread out all over the sectors. So that has been our strategy. So now we have more than 700 local women councillors because of this kind of gender mainstreamization activities. So, but for us, the task is that still there are biological women. So how to make their representation to be more politically and more sustainable society, for more sustainable society representation. So that is our task. So, but many of sustainable development tasks related with the social economy and some kind of revival of rural villages. Many of those kind of sectors were done by this kind of politically reoriented women. So I think it is a kind of new asset or new some kind of solidarity to make our society be more sustainable. I try to say more positive.
But indeed, there have been a lot of positive achievements. But may I invite Duksu to say something? Duksu has very beautiful digital portraits, etc. So we will be showing them during the tea break, before the tea break. So Duksu.
I guess we're only in Korean.
Yes, it's also okay.
But she is not 100% sure, but there is going to be 200,000 comfort women has been recorded from 1940s on, and among those from the Korea only. So among those, she reported 48, but now. Recently, some of those has passed away, so 46. Only 46 survivors has remained. And when I think about that kind of the murderings, she always feels thrilled and very threatened. It is a kind of rape, a state level of rape. So, but the targeting object of the rape is that usually the girls, teenage girls at that time. So, when she heard that kind of story for the first time, the immediate response is the hatred towards anonymous Japanese men. So she doesn't want that kind of a hatred growing inside of her heart. So she wants to some kind of make some kind of internal reconciliation in her own self and try to drawing. So she made 1,000 drawings. So she doesn't know, but she wants to express the pains and some kind of state violence and also some kind of killings of all the young lives. So with that, so one thing she wants to ask the responsibility, especially Japanese men, to this kind of reconciliation or healing, and also so not only we are growed or influenced by this kind of hatred, we want to make some kind of a festival-like reconciliation activities.
이거 지금
때문에 이런 문제를 어떻게 푸는가. 한국 여자가 한국 나가서 풀 수 있는 방법 이걸 생각을 했어요. 그거 지금 하는 게 아니면 나중에 해? 그거 있다 그러고 나중에 한다고 했어요.
So she wants to just suggest some kind of that kind of festivity practice. So, but she is going to suggest it later.
So can I? Clarisse, would you like to say something?
So I hope to add something substantial to the discussions that have occurred. My research interest regarding women is actually about exploring spaces of resistance for Filipina migrant domestic workers. But what I do notice is a kind of similarity in a sense, if you'll allow me to be a bit simplistic about it, is the act of erasure that occurs when there is an oppression of women, and it's common actually to a lot of marginalized groups, but more so with women because they are so enclosed in the domestic space. And that's also actually a point of interest when I was doing my, well, I'm still actually conducting it, well, I am conducting my research on the migrant domestic worker, because while her concerns are very economic in nature, like many of them go there because they have poor families or because they feel abused in the home country or something, they're still confined within the domestic, and because of that, it seems that their concerns are private or just within the private sphere, so they shouldn't be talked about outside in public. One of the models that I discussed also in the other session was about the Hong Kong women, the migrants in Hong Kong who go out every Sunday in the public space as their form of leisure. Then we see here, it was actually coined by other scholars already as a site of resistance, because in itself, when you're confined to the private and you go out into the public where you are able to be seen, it's actually a form of subversion of power structure where you're invisible. So the very notion of just being yourself as a human being and being out in the open air is already resistance. But we also see here that the subversion happens within personal networks as well, because these women, they help each other. So there's a form of personal relationship between one migrant domestic worker and herself. So there's also a form of solidarity building there, even if they may not have the term for it, though maybe some of them do have. So it must be a given, if the act of violence against women is erasure, that the next thing to do would be to surface their narratives. And this has actually been done by some, though not in all countries where there are Filipina migrant domestic workers. Again, there was actually a film released last year during the Metro Manila Film Festival. It's called Sunday Beauty Queen, and it's about Filipina migrant domestic workers in Hong Kong, and about the beauty pageants that they hold when they go out on Sundays. And it's more of a documentary, but you see there how these women's lives are, and how, though it seems light that it's just a beauty pageant or whatever, they manage to find solidarity within each other, and they manage to surface their stories. And so the film actually won best film in the film festival, and it did raise a lot of awareness amongst people in the Philippines, and it got people talking about the situation of Filipino migrant domestic workers. Not that they weren't talking about it before, because a large number of Filipinos have many relatives abroad, but it's just that now it's really a public discussion, not just, oh, I have a family member who lives over there, and so they'll send their goods over here or something. It becomes something that is a public concern, whereas before it was just kind of trapped in the private space. So, well, of course, there may be other occurrences or other findings, but that's just my own observation from the research I've been doing so far. So yes, thank you.
Yes, thank you. So before we invite Amy to speak, can Jessica and Hing, could you also come over here so that you can also say something? Afterwards, if you like, you can go back to your seat, if you like, yes. And I also know that maybe there are also some local women's groups representatives coming, so if you like, please feel free to say that, to say anything. So, Amy, please.
Okay, thank you. I'm sharing some experience or some achievement in Hong Kong women's movement. Actually, I think everything started in the Beijing Forum in '95, similar to Japan and Korea. And at that time, a lot of local women's group also went to Beijing. And afterwards, when they back to Hong Kong, they formed a coalition and then working on some kind of central mechanism that promote gender equality in government. And as a result, we managed to have some discrimination ordinance. We have 2 discrimination ordinance that are focusing on gender discrimination. One is called sex discrimination, so mainly the discrimination on gender of people in employment and service acquiring. So that is in 96 or 98 around that time. And the other ordinance is on family status discrimination. So it's about tenancy and about being a carer in the family, and they are protected by the law. So these 2 laws is very important for women and for carer in the laboring market, because Hong Kong is a very small city. So a very high percentage of its population have to be engaged in the labor market. Otherwise, it will be very difficult for their survival. So these 2 ordinances, they provide some basic protection for women that are entering labor market. I remember when I was a teenager, the advertisement on the newspaper that for recruitment, they write literally that they will prefer female reception or female secretary. But after this enactment of this 2 ordinance, you will no longer see this kind of advertisement in Hong Kong's newspaper. And some protection of equal pay is also available in some sense. So these 2 laws is very important. And the other thing is the Women's Commission and also the Hong Kong joining the CEDAW, UN CEDAW committee, that CEDAW resolution, and that is also provide opportunity for us to fight for a women commission in the government. Although its effectiveness is very questionable nowadays, but in some sense we have a government body that is will take responsibility on gender issue and also on policy that is related to gender equality. So these are the 2 things that I think is the largest achievement in the policy level and also in the constitution level in Hong Kong. And also in the cultural and social service area, we are able to have some services provided for women who suffer from violence, like domestic violence or sexual assault. There will be some kind of social service that is available for them to seek help and some kind of shelter. And this is the social service achievement that we are able to have. And also, in culturally speaking, it is also important for this victim to be acknowledged and to make the society see the trauma that they are undergoing. So so culturally speaking, this kind of space is now we have achieved it. And also on another important issue since year 2000 is the sex work in Hong Kong. before year 2000 is being very much discriminated and marginalized by the government, although it is not criminalized in Hong Kong for prostitution. But they always suffer from a very serious social stigma, and also being very often being oppressed by the local district councillor. So they are always suffer from police riot. But after year 2000, we have able to manage to have a large debate among the civil society on whether prostitution is some kind of although it is obviously it is a kind of exploration to female, but at the same time it's also a way for them to manage their surviving. And if their right is protected and they are able to have do the sex work in a safe space, not being discriminated by the police for, then it could be a way for them to have a kind of livelihood. So this kind of sex work, and now they are managed to have some kind of union for the sex worker in Hong Kong, both female and male sex worker. So they are different union in Hong Kong. So I think it is some positive aspect of Hong Kong women's movement.
So Amy is from the Association for the Advancement of Feminism in Hong Kong, and I'd like to invite Jessica. Jessica is from the Hong Kong Christian Council.
Now working in Hong Kong Christian Council, so I think I'm the only voices from Christianity group that which works advocated the female voices in Hong Kong. And then for me, somehow churches or Christianity somehow is like a barrier of enhancing the gender justice or gender equality, because lots of conservative Christian groups thinks that men are more higher status than women, and then they think that a patriarchal system inside churches are more easy to control in the sense of administration. So somehow I think inside of Christianity, we are like a barrier for having gender equality. But we are the group inside churches that we hope that we can try to enhance the equality inside churches and let people listen more the voice of women. And then here are our leaflets about our ministry, and then I'll just use like 1 to 2 minutes to explain our ministry, and then I will try to share quite a special experience that our linkage with the conflict women in Japan and Korea. Actually, our Hong Kong Christian Council is like already more than 60 years history inside Hong Kong, and then we are a group that got different members churches inside, and then we have different branches of ministry, and then gender justice is just one of our ministry. And then in 2009 we have a mission consultation that's where we will check every 10 years. We will check every 10 years that how the mission goes with the churches, and then inside that consultation there's one women's assembly, and then at that time different pastors from the churches, especially the women pastors, share that there's different phenomena inside the churches. One is the wages of the pastor is not equal. Also the numbers of the pastor inside the churches is mostly are male dominated. And then the second thing, they found out lots of violence, especially sexual violence inside the churches. So after the assembly, they wrote we call Women's Platform for Action, and then after the consultation, they didn't stop there. They form a group and then try to work out the action after that. And then that's how our group or our ministry starts. We are mainly concerned the sexual violation inside the churches, and then we want to adopt policy and then start the training inside churches that we are zero tolerance on the sexual violence inside churches. So along the line, we try to have the policy against sexual harassment, and then during the policy, we try to give out training and talks to the churches leaders and the parents also. And we try to, this line is, we try to go up to the down. We try to encourage and persuade the church leaders that the policy is good for the churches, and then to protect and to give a safe environments to the people inside the churches. But we think it's very difficult and hard to persuade church leaders because mostly they are men, and then they do not think that this is the top agenda for their churches. They only concern the number of people inside churches keep on increasing, but they didn't concern about the safety issues or the equality issue inside their churches. So we try different aspects and different angles to spread out the gender education inside the churches. One thing we did in the past inside the Umbrella Revolution or Umbrella Movement in 2014, we filmed a documentary that because at that time inside the movement also we have experienced some sexual assault or sexual violence inside the movement. People, especially the conservative camps, they use the sex to stop people to participate inside the movement. So at the time we decided to have a documentary, and we interviewed 10 women protesters to share that why they still willing to join even that there has sexual assault inside the movement. And then mostly they are have a religion background, maybe they are Catholic or Christians, so they share also how's the faith to encourage them to join. And then apart from that, we have quite a special experience that we met a families group from Japan, and then okay, and so that's something related to the morning sharing about the comfort women. Before I met them, I didn't know. Or I didn't know the details of the linkage about the comfort woman and Hong Kong history, or even in the gender aspect, because in our past education we didn't have a long detailed explanation about how the Japanese army did the sexual assault to the different parts of the women in the parts of the world. Maybe we just have one line, and then we just got over it inside the whole entire history. So I think in the 2014 I met a group of Japanese feminists, and then they introduced me about a group called, it's hard to translate in English, but try. They are like, it's in Shanxi, is a province in China, and then they are a group that trying to find the truth. And then they are the group that try to especially take care of a group of comfort women in Shanxi. And then at the time they told me that they find out totally there are 10 of the comfort women in Shanxi province. And then at that time, and in 2015 when I visited the province, they said only one woman left. Yeah. Here it is. She's called Jung. She's the only lady that still exists in 2015, but sadly after 1 year we left, she passed away. And then at that trip, it's very educational and very emotional for us, because firstly, I'm really amazed that there is a group of Japanese people who try to preserve the history, which the history that make them feel shameful, and then very painful to share with people. That's how Japanese people destroy or the shameful past from their own country. It's not easy for them to share this kind of emotions, and then I'm quite impressed that there's not only women inside the group, and this is our trip photo. Some of them are the people who keep on helping or visiting the comfort women from China, but most of them are actually from Japan. And then from my right hand side of the photo, even there's a Japanese man. And he's his history teacher, and then some of them are the lawyer from Japan. And then they also share how their first experience to listen about the comfort women history, and then how they gather all around from Japan and then try to preserve this history, and then get together and then to form an NGO called Shanxi Chaminghui. That means Shanxi, try to find the truth, the group. So for me, it's a very impressive group, and then I adore and admire how they keep on doing like for 10 or even 20 years, and then try to preserve the history. So after the trip, and also that trip is actually is like a passing the history to the youth. So not only me from Hong Kong and my friend from Hong Kong, and then some of them are from Shanxi Daxue. That means there's some Chinese students from the province, and then 5 to 6 Japanese students, women students. So they really try hard to spread the history towards the youth. And then, because Jiangxi is the only women still live inside that province, so they also invite the daughter of other comfort women. Some of them maybe they are only like adopted family, because most of the comfort women, they suffer lots of from their body, so they cannot really give birth to the babies apart from them. So yeah. And then after the exposure trip, and then we think that this history is very important to, I think it's not only to Asia or to Hong Kong, but we try to, but it's good to keep on saying these stories to the youth. And then so we organized our first screening about the comfort woman. And sorry, this is in Chinese, but this is the DVD that I got from their group, and actually the director is the museum, the director. Yep. So this documentary is really good because they try to they illustrated 3 of the comfort women stories, and then how they try to went to Japanese government and try to share their own story and then rights in their parliament. So this is the first screening we share in Hong Kong, and the date is quite special because in 2015, that year was the 70 years of Second World War, and especially in the Sino-Japanese war ended in Hong Kong. So we have 1 day off in September 3rd, actually it's only at 2015 only. So we use that holiday, and then we have a screening, and then one of the speakers is also inside the conference is Masao, and then he is really very special for us because it's hard to, actually during the organizing of the screening, I call Casey, I call Shun teacher, because it's hard to find a speaker that still concerned about this issue, but not in the sense of nationalism. Because most of the people still keep on remember this story because they hate the Japanese, and then they want to uprising the Chinese power. But actually, but it is very difficult to invite somebody in a sense of gender, and then also in a faith or religion. So Masao is really good in this sense because it's a he is, I think he claimed that he's a feminist, and then he's Catholic. So it's good to listen his how he encountered with comfort women. And there's one interesting I learned because most of the time we call them comfort women in Chinese Wai On Fu, but at the trip they changed the terminology called Dai Le. I think maybe in the English translation maybe just a mother. just a very honorable mother. So I think the terminology, the change of terminology to how to claim their name is quite special for us too. And then the second year we have another screening is Korean women. But she is, I think she stayed in Japanese side in Tsusin, no, not Tsusin, in Okinawa. So I think in her story are even more empowering because she is very strong to demanding her rights in Korea, but how she stayed in Japan and then how she encouraged other women to stand up and then share the story. So that's another screening that we organized last year. For us, I think we didn't do really much on how to help them to demanding their rights in their own country and their story. But I think in a sense of Christianity, keep on telling the stories, and then we how we memorize those minority and even like voiceless groups, because most of them are really old, and then they are closely pass away. So I think it is something that we can do only like keep on telling the story, and then inside the wartime, they are one of the majority group that suffer a lot of the war, but we didn't say anything for them. So I think in a sense of Christianity, this is we quite believe that the power of memory. Yeah, because inside churches we keep on remember the story of Jesus Christ. So I think this is something Christianity is strong of. So this the two experience of screening are quite not really in the strong aspect of our ministry, but we try to keep on saying or keep on having this screening to the public. You can see not much people came to our screening. It looked just like, and half of them are speakers. So you can see how small group of people only interested in these kind of stories. But this group or this kind of sharing or exhibition always inspire us or keep us strong inside our group, because we cannot do much, but we can just keep on telling the story and encourage people to at least keep on memory them. Yeah, I think, yeah, my presentation. Thank you.
Her being such a young, energetic, dynamic lady, but then with this sense of memory of history, and also crossing the borders and being concerned that we do not have this hatred transformed into very narrow nationalistic sentiments. So it is really very hard to have this. But then, well, actually, here in the room we have several generations of women activists in Hong Kong, and so I think we will invite Shun Hing. She's the first generation.
Good morning, everybody. Yeah. First generation. Maybe a little bit of the background. My background. Yeah. I think. Back in 1984, I think when Amy introduced AAF, Association for the Advancement of Feminism, and I was one of the founding members of the organization. So we have been surviving until now, so over 30-something years. That actually was quite amazing for me too, because we didn't expect what will happen to the group and the Hong Kong women's movement. Yeah, and before I go into a little bit of the work in Hong Kong, first of all, I would like to actually pay my respect and memory for Yayuri, because I also met her, yeah, and when she came to Hong Kong, and then in Beijing when the Women's Conference, the Women's Forum, it's called World Women's Forum. And also my respect for, I think, what Jung and the Korean and the Japanese situation. I mean, the effort to put on comfort women on, Jung said you're good at campaign, and the Japanese effort on documentation, and they're very good museum. Yeah, because I think these two arms of the movement are actually very important. Yeah, and then we feel very also shameful because I think in Hong Kong, I think we are weak in both arms, campaign and documentation on comfort women. I think we didn't, actually there weren't much done on this aspect. I think definitely there were something done on it, but I didn't really know much about it until I think in 2005 when we launched the helped in the Nobel Peace Prize Women. That we came across some documentations about comfort women. I think and in Hong Kong, the memory about the Japanese invasion, which was always sort of like coming up to the public, was only actually more on the retired soldiers or the local Chinese soldiers trying to claim back the military coupon, the currency that were used at that time. So and they couldn't. They have one big pile and then they couldn't use it. And so every year in the television we only can see men soldiers, retired soldiers, protesting to the Japanese embassy, saying that we want compensation for that. So, and this actually lets me think of why, well, there are actually not much other aspects, if we call it war crime, that have been sort of like being visualized or being made public in the TV or on other occasions in Hong Kong. So that is actually one of my reflections. And regarding the on general domestic violence against women campaign, I think the 90s, around the Women's International, this World Women's Forum, I think in Hong Kong is also the time when the campaign against violence against women became more sort of like people were more conscious about that. And there are also the campaign on from, I think the effort from the sexual minority groups also, like what Amy just mentioned, the sexual workers groups, the gay movement groups, and also among women's groups, they are concerned about sexual rights. Also came into being in the 90s. I don't know whether it's a coincidence or is it the effect of the Women's Forum, or there was a gradual development of the local women's movement in Hong Kong. Because back according to my own experience, we founded AF in 1984. So in the 80s we started more on like demanding women's rights on like equal pay for equal job, and then or more nurseries, that sort of more liberal requests. I think Amy just explained a bit. And later actually the voices become more diversified. And there are people coming from the different sexual minority, so-called sexual minority groups came. And then I think that is also, not only for the rights of, for example, sex can be sort of like more like kind of autonomous rights, but or kind of civil rights, but also the attention also paid to a lot of more domestic violence cases coming up at that decade also, I found it, so I think if we try to connect violence against women, particularly the sexual violence, so it's not only related to wartime, but also in everyday life, and also in the domestic sphere, and also just like Clarisse said about the domestic helpers, drawing the similarities between the government women and also the domestic workers, migrant workers. So I think there is something general, that we can see because of this kind of confinement or voiceless, that actually women suffer more violence, particularly sexual violence, which really difficult to spell it out. For women to spell it out, the hurt or the thing at the body. And thirdly, I think coming back to the term peace, my experience will be more actually with the Nobel Peace Prize campaign. I started with when Kiu Chi initiated that, and some of us who are here who were involved in the campaign. I think that actually opened up my perspective on peace campaign. So not only that I was more aware of the comfort women's situations in Asia, but also tried to also way to connect our experience or the violence we face in everyday life. So not only sexual violence, but other kinds of violence also, which threatened our being. For example, like the ecological crisis, and the environmental degradation, our loss of livelihood because of globalization or the neoliberalism, and all these things I think came into the scenery, and then make us actually widen our perspective on what is peace. And so it's not only a kind of war and peace, but also peace as violence and peace, the violence that we see or experienced by women in our everyday life. So I think I don't want to go into details of the campaign, but I think what we've been actually involved in these things until now, particularly Kiu Chi has done a lot of things to document things. I think that's also very important. And for me, I focus some research on ecology, culture, and peace, on the women's effort on that. And I think that also turned my life track also, because after I retired, now I try to do some more farming or involved in conservation, land conservation, and environmental issues. I think the impact actually came mainly from my involvement with this peace movement. So I think, and the final point, now I'm working on my so-called our collective and the farm is in Namchong, which is actually in the near the northern border of the Hong Kong northern border. So, and we are now actually doing a oral history project with the villages, and there were actually Japanese invasion in the village, at that time. So we were, but we have only able to interview one or two villagers who were actually guerrillas, the Chinese guerrillas at that time who fought against the Japanese invasion in the village. And they told us that actually there's a station, I don't know what it's called, a kind of station in that village. And then, but I didn't have a chance to ask whether there are comfort women stationed in that particularly Namchong or Château-Jiao area. Yeah, because that is also one of the points. I think because it's at the border, and then so the Japanese puts the what's it called, the defense or the military sites there. So I have to take out maybe some thing from my current experience. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So thank you.
Well, although I say that Shen Hing is the first generation of the feminist activists here, do not be deceived by her silver hair. She acquired her silver hair when she was before she was 40 years old. So she actually founded the AAF when she was 30. And so the silver hair was when she was doing her PhD in Peking University, so you know how hard they drive the students. So we take that as a sign of, not of age, but of wisdom. So now I'd like to invite Jinhua to tell us something about the situation in China. And I'll do the interpreting.
从1995年世界妇女大会之后，到现在20年，30年，20年，30年这个在这20年当中，整个中国的那个变化非常的巨大，而且非常急剧，而且不断改变方向。
Well, since the NGO Forum on Women in 1995, it has been 22 years, and the situation in China has developed very dramatically.
它从1995年之前，女性主义是一个脏字，到迅速的在10年当中，女性学遍及了中国所有的大学，然后女性主义全面的传播和普及。
So before 1995, feminism, the word feminism was a word which was actually dirty and negative. But then after 1995, it got mainstream, and then almost all the main universities have divisions on women's studies, etc. And so it has actually been successfully mainstream.
那么90年代和世纪之初，中国的女性 主义研究、女性运动、女性行动的有2个主要的特征，一个主要的特征就是它基本上是被国际 NGO 所支持。
So in the late 90s and also in the early 2000s, there have been a lot of women's studies, women's conferences, seminars, etc. But then they have been mostly so-called guided by international NGOs.
这个国际 NGO 的这个支持，同时造成了这样的一种女性研究和女性行动的一个重要的取向，就是朝向基层女性，朝向基层妇女。
So supported by the international NGOs, so the direction of women's studies and women's actions have been oriented towards grassroots women's work.
那么这种情况的发生，同时对应着当时的中国的底层社会基本上是处于一种真空状态。
But this was also at a time when the subaltern or the grassroots situation, and it was in a sort of vacuum.
那么近10多年来的变化是，中国的基层的组织开始重新的恢复。 但是同时，国际 NGO 受到了中国政府的排斥。
So in the last decade, we see a situation where there have been mushrooming and flourishing of grassroots organizations in China, but at the same time, certain pressure from the Chinese government to contain the work of the international NGOs.
那么。 于是就是开始出现了一个重要的变化，就是在整个中国范围之内，媒体文化生产基本上被城市中产阶级所占据，并且服务于城市中产阶级。
So we also see the change in China, which is that there's a very rapid development of media culture. and yet such culture is predominantly dominated by urban middle class.
那么，所谓中国的城市中产阶级的特征是，他们都很年轻。
One characteristic of this urban middle class in China is that they are very young.
受教育程度很高。
Well educated.
有很普遍的有跨国经验。
And also have cross-border, cross-nation, national border experiences.
所以他们表现出了一种非常开放的、激进的性别态度。
So in terms of attitude about gender, so they demonstrate quite an openness.
有一个玩笑的，就是一个玩笑的帖子在网上流传的非常广，说如果你想在 Internet 上面生存，有一些事情是不能做的。
So there's a joke widely disseminated on the internet. They say that if you want to survive on the internet, there's one thing you cannot do.
在6件事当中有3件跟性别有关。
And so they listed 6 things that you shouldn't do, and then of the 6, 3 are related to gender.
一条就是说同志不能黑，一定不要去嘲笑同性恋者。
One is you cannot be discriminative against homosexuality.
那么另外一条实际上是相近的，说直男癌去死，直男那些疯狂的直男可以去死了。
And then the second one is the straight men go to heaven. Straight men go to heaven.
那么那些装作很女性的那个传统女性，她们其实是化妆的妓女。
这个是，
就是在说不要演那些好女人，就是不要相信那些表演的好女人。
And then the third one is those who appear to be very traditional women, they were actually prostitutes. The meaning of this is that don't pretend that you are a good woman, a virtuous woman.
所以而且同时在整个的流行文化当中，他们一定要设置一个非常女性化的男性作为正面人物。
And also in popular culture, they usually would portray, would have a character which is a very feminist man. In order to feminized or feminine man.
同时一个非常奇特的时尚就是女性社群热衷于去想象各种各样的男性的同性恋关系。
And so that was politically correct. And then there's also one other popular trend that is women's groups would like to imagine what it's like for gay the community.
Gay man relationship.
They would like to imagine what could be gay men relationships, but then this is among women's groups only.
Something like slash, or in Japanese they call it BL, boys love. Yeah, story of BL. Yeah. 但是就是说，与此同时是整个的底层社会、边缘社会完全的从媒介上消失了。
But at the same time, when all this talk about gender, etc., is going on, but then the marginalized grassroots groups have basically disappeared from the mainstream media, from the internet media.
不光是在媒体上面，甚至在中国的城市的社会生活的那个景色当中，中老年妇女完全的变为不可见。
Not only the grassroots disappear and vanish from the media, the middle-aged and old-aged women also disappeared from the scene of the urban social life.
就说男同性恋者的形象开始成为一种正面形象的同时，有一种新的 就是流行的负面形象，叫做剩女。
So at the same time, when gay homosexuality becomes a positive image, you have a very negative image of what we call the surplus women, those who can't get married.
实际上这个与剩女形象密切相关的是，在整个中国的近20年的变化当中，性别的不平等，同时是和性别的不平等重新被确立，而这个确立是和整个社会的私有化过程完全同步。
So in the last 2 decades, we see the consolidation of gender inequalities in China. And this process has been going on at the same time with the privatization process.
那么有一种结论，是我读到的哈，不是我做出的。有一种结论是说，大概近20年之内，中国的社会财富增长了几10倍，而这个社会财富的增长过程，也是社会财富从男人和女人共同占有，而通过家庭转移到男人身上的过程。
I've read one conclusion, one observation. It's not mine, but I've read it somewhere. That in the last 20 years, there has been an increase of dozens times of increase of social wealth in China. But then there is this shift from ownership by both men and women to ownership by men through the privatization of wealth by the families.
正是因为这样的一个过程，所以所谓的剩女、拒绝结婚的或者可以选择不结婚的女人，成为对这样的一个新的男权的私有制的威胁。
So it is in this context that the so-called surplus women, that is the women who do not get married or who refuse to get married, then they become a threat to this kind of privatization and concentration of wealth in the hands of men.
但是过程并不是这样的一个单一的方向非常明确的。实际上，在今天，围绕着性别所发生的事情本身都非常复杂。
But then, of course, we find that things are not as simplistic or only one-directional. Actually, the issue is very complex.
一方面，你可以看到整个中国社会，就在发生着一个家庭的再中心化的过程。
We see in China a new process of family nuclearization, the nuclearization process in China.
但是这样的一个家庭再中心化过程，包含了城市的那个美国式的核心家庭的这样的这个重建。
So it is a kind of mode of the American style of nuclear families.
但是同时也包含了一种中国传统的中国家庭价值的强调。
But then at the same time, it is there is this reiteration of traditional family values from China.
然后这个祖父母再次的获得了重新强调生育孙子，并且传宗接代的这样的一个权利，就是父母干预儿女的婚姻，就是以这个传宗接代的名义。
And then we have this. We see the generation of grandparents asserting the will and on the need for the grandchildren, and that is an intervention of the generation on their own children in the name of the grandchildren.
可以推荐大家一部电影叫《浮城谜事》。
英文是什么
？I don't know， 我一会儿会查。
So Professor Dan would want to recommend a movie to you, but then we will check the English name of the movie.
在这个故事，它是一个犯罪故事。
So it is a crime story.
其中的那个男人实际上是拥有2个家庭，同时拥有3重生活。2个家庭3重生活。
So the protagonist is a man who has 2 families and 3 spheres of life.
一个家庭是标准的城市中产阶级家庭，他和妻子，然后有1个女儿。
So one family that he has is the standard urban family, 1 wife, 1 daughter.
事实上，他的公司是妻子的公司。
And his firm, his company is the wife's company.
所以他事实上是一个雇佣的经理。
So he is actually an employed manager for that company.
而另一重家庭是秘密的家庭，有1个男孩子。
And then the other family is a clandestine family with a boy. Oh, by the way, the name of the film is Mystery.
Mystery.
那么这个家庭是被祖母所承认的家庭。
So this family is the one recognized by the grandmother.
那个犯罪的发生是因为这个男人去嫖娼。
The reason for the crime is that because this man went to prostitution.
那个性工作者是一个来自贫困的农村家庭的女大学生。
And the sex worker is a university student coming from a poor rural background.
然后所以他就是非常无辜的死在一个富二代的所制造的车祸当中。好，不用这么复杂，这个女孩被杀死了。
这个女的
对，就这个女。
And then the crime is that this sex worker somehow died in the crime.
所以这是今天中国的家庭或者性别状态的一个缩影。
So this is a kind of epitome of the situation of families and of gender in China today.
但是从另外一个角度上看，整个中国的那个在中国社会的两端，就是大城市的上层和边远地区的底层，家庭事实上已经破碎和解体了。
But actually, in the 2 extremes of society, one is in the urban elite class, or in the rural poor families. Technically, families have the family has disintegrated.
因为首先是因为这个流动和打工。
First, because of the mobility of the migrant workers.
就上层的国际流动和底层的这个国内流动。
And so there's the mobility of those the elites in national arena, but then also the mobility of the peasant workers within China.
而另一个问题就是孩子的教育。
And the other question is education for the children.
上层越来越早的把孩子送到国外去接受教育。
So the elite would be sending their children at a very early age to sending them abroad for education.
而在底层，这个中心学区化使孩子开始入学就完全的离开了家庭。
And then for the subalterns, then the children leave their family at an early age because of this new policy of education, concentrating students in certain areas.
为了照顾孩子，开始出现这个所谓的陪读，父母一方去和孩子一起到遥远的地方。
So we see that both for the urban upper classes and also for the poor rural families, we have a new phenomenon that is one of the parents will be accompanying the child for their education, either abroad or away from their rural home to in the nearby towns.
那么同样的问题的最恶劣的方面，就是说，在这样的一个流动变化的过程当中，开始有很多的孩子被抛弃。
But then we also see in this fluid and mobility, then there's a phenomenon of more and more children being abandoned.
那么在整个中国的富庶的南方，被饿死的孩子。这个和整个一个村庄的那个孩子都没有了母亲。 的事情是大概今天中国的那个很大的悲剧。
So we have heard incidents of children starving to death in the so-called affluent southern China, and we also see
就是一个村庄的孩子都没有母亲。
That for a whole village, all the children are there without their mother being with them. So we see incidents or phenomena like this in China today.
那么他们的母亲可能就在附近的城镇做性工作者。
So it is possible that the mothers of these children are sex workers in nearby towns.
那么所以对于我来说，思考今天的女性别议题和思考今天的妇女运动的方向，本身联系着我们要重新的定义全球化时代的父权究竟是什么。
So for me, when we try to make sense of gender issues in China, gender issues or the orientations of women's movements, we need to redefine patriarchy in this era of finance capitalism.
这2年来最为成功的一个大陆的出门秀真人秀节目的名字就叫《爸爸去哪儿了》。
So in China, in the last 2 years, one of the very famous Truman shows is Where is Daddy? Where has Daddy gone?
除了赤裸裸的金钱作为父权可以占据父权的位置之外，我们就是今天在性别的意义上。 如何讨论男权和父权
So is apart from the question of money and ownership, when we talk about patriarchy, so we also have to look at it in the gender sense. Thank you very much. So I would like to ask Tani, pass the microphone to Tani to say something.
It's very interesting to me that in Jinhua's presentation just now, she stresses very much social chaos and social upheaval under the name of finance capital. And I think this is a platform or a commonality that perhaps in the analysis of current conditions is very important. Each one of our background countries or our personal experience is quite different, but perhaps what we share in common is this chaotic present. Now I'm going to talk about the chaotic present in the United States right now. And this will not really be a very good analysis, but I want to communicate to you a couple of things that are of great concern right now for observers. Because in chaotic situations, it's very difficult to find a the basic foundational critical analysis. It takes some time to think through what these symptoms are suggesting. About myself, I will say that much of my experience of conscientizing came through my own background as what is called a red diaper or pink diaper baby in the United States, and I have written a paper about this which is circulating in English and I think in Chinese translation. But when Jessica was talking about the power of memory, and as the first speakers were invoking particularly the memory of Yayori, these are also part of my memory because it just so happens that given my professional training and my interests, I share some of these experiences with you. The various different reports from different colleagues in the women's movement are very specific to the conditions where you live or work. So let me talk a little bit about two things that are positive, which involve the United States, which is where I live. Some of them are professional gains, and some of them have to do with gains in our national discourse. Before I start to talk and describe those things, I want to say that much of my professional life involves what's called internationalization in education in the United States. So it's part of my job for at least the last 20 years to bring into the lives of my students and colleagues some understanding of what is going on in the rest of the world that should be of concern to them, and specifically in my case, what is going on in the Asia-Pacific area. So when I teach, for example, the movie that Mina introduced us to, the last movie, I teach this movie. I teach it in several of my classes, and I do that because it communicates to my students in a very condensed way. It shows the students what the crimes were, because they have a person representing the crime. But what is so overwhelming for my students who know nothing about comfort women or the Second World War, they only know atom bomb, you know, greatest war, that kind of stuff. But what they fall in love with is the protagonist's strength. So they say over and over again, how could this survivor be so strong? How can she be so strong? How can she love life so much? How can she be so emotional? Okay, so your work in creating this film does a lot of work for me. I don't say anything. I don't have to teach. All I have to do is show this film with the subtitles and then listen to my students when they cry. Because my students do a lot of crying, even though they really respect and admire this survivor. Anyway, so that's the background, a little bit about the background of my mixed teaching and personal experience that brings me to this spot to participate in this meeting. So I want to talk in a positive way about things that have changed for the better in the United States since 1995. Now keep in mind that 1995 for many American feminists is memorable because it showed them how to hate China. Remember that Mrs. Clinton came to the Women's Forum to make a point that the Chinese government is evil, and because it represses women and it refused to let women speak in Beijing, so the women had to run out to, you know, some other place and be women, and so on and so on. So although a lot of good things happened and American women, along with the women of the world, made a lot of connections and learned a little bit about each other, the national scene, in the national scene, there was an underlying fear of the Chinese government. Despite that fear, 1995 was also a very important and significant moment for international American feminism in its relation to, particularly to Asia and to Eastern Europe. It was in the mid-90s that many American activists, middle-class women, and professional academics like me had their first encounters with foreign feminists. And there were many associations. For example, Joan Scott is a very, very famous feminist historian working in the United States. I myself have benefited a great deal from being, she was my patron. So without knowing anything about me, she helped my career just because of the kind of feminist work I did in history. She took away from 1995 her association with Eastern Europe and with the question of head covering. So she went from being Western-oriented to a kind of internationalism, which involved the question of Islam and head covering, and also linking up with Eastern European feminist philosophy. So this was a big impact on her. In the professional movements, 1995 began mainstreaming in the United States, just as it did in Japan, China, and all of the Asian nations, and sub-nations, and almost nations. In our context, this mainstreaming also involved, as Dai Jinhua was talking about, the formal setting up of women's studies programs. So the same institutions that set up the Chinese women's movement also set up the institutional framework for American women's studies, and that institution was the Ford Foundation. So during these years, the Ford Foundation poured enormous amount of wealth into creating university women's studies programs. I worked in women's studies during this period, and my department, it was a program that became a department, had been thoroughly financed by Ford Foundation. That's why we existed. So you can see that because of the foundational funding coming from an international American foundation, our the pressure to mainstream a U.S.-oriented United Nations doctrine about women's rights, our human rights, was very, very strong. So we were encouraged to follow a scenario that's very similar to women's studies departments all over the United States, and many of them exported to places like China. I cannot speak for Korea or much for Japan, although I know in Japan this was also a kind of pressure that, that people also experienced. This has many positive elements, as many and many drawbacks. I'll speak to the positive elements. Gender mainstreaming does raise consciousness, and it raises consciousness both of women in middle-class professions, as well as their male colleagues, their own male generation, because the men see the women moving forward in these middle-class professions, and these are their marriage partners. In middle-class heterosexual marriage, more and more we find a kind of partnership model where educated women marry educated men, and both give a kind of, they both speak the language of gender equality. Now there's sociological evidence that actually it's not very equal, but even to think about or to hear or to speak about this ideal of something called equity or equality is really a step forward. The other thing that happened as a consequence of making gender equality normative or mainstream is that queer theory surged forward. So probably the greatest news in the American scene has been the normatization of lesbian and gay life and philosophy. Now this is positive in many ways. It complicates feminism in some good ways. So feminist philosophy is much richer now because when you detach gender identity or sexuality from everyday life course, it becomes far more complex. It's mainstreaming in a way that's kind of problematic for people like me because it leads to a focus on the discussion around marriage. So advocating gay marriage and advocating gay women in the military are not particular topics that interest me or that I would put energy into, but they do make gay existence and now trans existence quite openly discussed in our media and among my students and peers. But this is a foundation that leads to a more difficult problem, and that is the problem of politicization. If we think of the acceptance of multicultural ways of life as just a sociological fact, now in many parts of the United States, you can introduce, if I introduce my wife or my friend introduces his husband, nobody says, oh my God. They just say, oh, I'd like to meet your spouse. Even in the most backward parts of our country, we find people who have normatized, because marriage is the great equalizer, right? If you're married, then you contain sex within a sacred relationship of marriage. And there's something that appeals to many people about that. But what we find now, particularly in the most immediate 6 months, is something that is more difficult to explain, and that is the phenomenon of the Women's March. Right after the election of the new president, millions of women mobilized. Now, many went on the march, and this march happened even in Texas. We had a march in Austin where I participated with we had, I believe, between 50 and 70,000 people just in Texas, one place in Texas. There were about 10 to 20,000 in Houston. Remember, Texas is the litmus test of the absolutely most hostile environment for this kind of work. It's good to be in Texas for that reason. But imagine how many ordinary women came out. The question is this a politics? Now, why did they come out? I always ask people, you know, what are you doing here? Why are you here? And I spoke to 3 different women, all white, all middle class, who said to me, I don't know why I'm here. I don't even vote. I don't consider myself political. I've never gone to a political meeting. I just hate what's going on. I don't like to be treated as a sexualized object. And so I came out here, and it feels really good to be with other women. That's as much as you could get from them. That's as much self-consciousness that they have. So there's that. What we find now as well are things that are breaking to the surface. We can say, if we do research, if we monitor the media, if we look at publications, we will certainly find empirical reasons for this sudden flashing up, this sudden surfacing of strong debates. There will be roots for why this happened. But I'm reporting to you what is happening so that you understand what is strange and new and different. What we see is a pushback or a refusal to accept ordinary sexual harassment And I don't know if you monitor the US media, but this is the Bill Cosby tragedy. Bill Cosby, as a black entertainer, a very important symbol of black African-American respectability. And for many years he's been accused of rape, and he just was declared a mistrial in a rape trial. I can speak again, as many of us have raised this problem of how do you prove a sexual crime? Why do you have to overprove? I myself was sexually harassed on the job, and it was very difficult for my institution to handle this because sexual harassment takes place between two people. There are no witnesses. A rape, for a comfort woman rape, will happen with countless men. Who can remember the faces of all these men and say, this man raped me? Or after repeated trauma say, you know, this is the man who did that, and accuse a single individual. So we cannot go on thinking that these are individual crimes, and yet we have no alternate way. So the Bill Cosby trial has been going on and making everyone extremely uncomfortable about these larger issues. The US president's accusation against a middle-class woman who is a media star, Mika Brzezinski, has had a huge impact. Mika Brzezinski is a woman, a professional woman, whose father was Minister of War, Minister of Defense in the United States during the Clinton, I guess even further back, maybe the Clinton administration. I'm sorry, I'm getting my American history confused. But she is royalty. She's American royalty. And she was accused by the President of the United States of menstruating in public. Now, when our president says she was bleeding from her eyes, or she was bleeding from her nose, or she was bleeding from her facelift, you know what he means. She was bleeding. She was an organic, biological woman in public, and that's something dirty. Now imagine all those apolitical women, those women who, I never went to a political demonstration, I'm not political, I don't even vote, and they turn on television in the morning and they hear people saying, the president said that Mika Brzezinski, a media star, is menstruating, basically. They discussed it. So how do you turn that into politics? How do you raise that to the level of a political discussion? Everybody that's, if you think about your mother had to menstruate, otherwise you're not going to be here, right? There's nothing dirty about menstruation or even talking about blood and women in a public forum or a national forum. Maybe that would be a good thing to do, I don't know. But now suddenly this is something that has come to the level of political discourse in my country. We have open discussion because of these rhetorical crimes. Let me call them rhetorical crimes. The vulgar use of sexual material in public discourse as though sexuality and women are something dirty. This has led to public discussion, which is very healthy. So fathers saying, I have daughters. How dare you talk about my daughter in this way? How dare you prevent my daughter from playing sports? I have a right to have my daughter be a basketball star, you know? Don't say that women are just good for procreation. This open discussion about human sexuality is quite intense right now in the United States because of this peculiar fascist order, or proto-fascist, perhaps. Again, it's very difficult for us on the left or even on the right to put into political language what it is that is happening. We know that the causes are very deep, but we don't yet know how to communicate it well in an analytical framework. So the issue really is very similar to what you are reporting and I'm writing in my notebook, and that is, how do we work on international exchange of methods for explicit politicization of these social problems. I think that using international incidents, like someone said, oh, the Comfort Woman incident has so much historical background, and we have the museum, and we have the forum, and the tribunal, and so on. I can teach this as a unit, and then say to my students, okay, think of US slavery and mass rape. How can we understand these two actual historical incidents and develop perhaps a way of understanding which is not full of shame, that is not full of this kind of grossness or shaming, public shaming of human sexuality. And that involves collaboration, I think, and a revival in the United States of our radical heritage, the Women's Strike for Peace, International Peace, Women for the End of Atomic Power, and all of the other groups that I grew up with as a red diaper baby. So thanks very much for this opportunity to speak.
Thank you very much. So we will have our last speaker, Auyeung. She's now coordinating the WikiPeaceWomen project.
Thank you. I will tell you a little bit of the background of the WikiPeaceWomen project. In 2005, PeaceWomen Across the Globe is an organization based in Switzerland, in Bern. The PeaceWomen project in 2005 was to nominate 1,000 women from over 150 countries for the 2005 Nobel Peace Prize. Professor Hing and Professor Lee Kiu Chi also are the coordinator of the Asia region. And Margaret is also, at that time, she went to Linzha province in China to collect the stories of the Jinhua, to let all the stories are genuine. Of course, this Nobel Prize was unsuccessful. Why? We collect 999 stories and one is missing. Why? Because the alumnus is the one who is the situation of all over the world's PeaceWomen maker. And why? And then this one, sorry, the one is for over unknown women of the world who have made significant contribution to world peace. Of course, it was not successful at that time. And then in order to continue the work to let the invisible PeaceWomen work to be visible, so WikiPeaceWomen has been launched on October 2015 at Bern, Switzerland. We have a team in Hong Kong, and then our head is Professor Lee Kiu Chi, and then Jin Pei-Yun is for Chinese language, and then George Lee is for English website, and now Kin Cheng is for the technical support. And then I'm ready. The search is on for 1 million women from over the world whose stories will be uploaded to the WikiPeaceWomen website. The idea is to call international attention to the vital role played by women for all walks of life in challenging, harmful, established social cultural boundaries institutions, and ideologies, and in creating and promoting peace in their communities and the world. With the documentation and promotion of the stories of 1 million women on the WikiPeaceWomen website, peace workers will be honored and given international recognition. Their lives and work will be documented through video and film, audio tape, printed biographies, and other media, and their strategies for constructive conflict resolution, peacemaker, and development will be analyzed by researchers worldwide and utilized in the study. Thank you. Of course, this is 1,000 peace women stories.
So you can imagine if we have 1 million women, we have 1,000 different volumes of this book. So instead of printing 1,000 different volumes of this book, we have this WikiPeaceWomen project. So we put the stories only on the website, and it is now also in different languages. It's also managed by the same team as the Global University for Sustainability team, the same team that also manages the Mina website, and any other website that Kiu Chi said he's open to helping to start different websites if you like. So, well, thank you very much all the speakers for this session. We have actually discussed various issues. We reviewed the history of 20, 30 years of the women's movement in different parts of the world and of the region. But then, actually some of us, we know each other, but then it is so good to also be updated on what we are doing. I think one very important discussion is how can we also always have this historical sense of having this, making sense of history again and again so that we can better deal with the present situation, understand what has led to the current stage as it is, but then also maybe see our own achievements, because I think very often we come up and when we do analysis, we talk about the problems, and then it is as if we haven't really done enough. Of course, there's always more to be done, more to be achieved, but I think on the one hand we celebrate all the work that we have done, and that is by millions of women and men, maybe invisibly, maybe quietly in the different corners, in the different locations, but we feel that that need to be made visible. But then it's not only the visibility, it's the need for connection, the need for us to bring all the different forces together, whether it is in terms of the discourse, of ideas, of the orientation, or in terms of the actual work. And there is this urgent need for women's intervention in peace work so that we can try to prevent humanity from disappearing from the earth, and to prevent the earth from disappearing from this universe. So we have a very urgent task, but I think I think on this occasion we celebrate the work that we have been doing. We have very good faith in the different generations to work together, and very often we talk about the younger generation as the very important force to be the actors. But actually, I find that now. Actually, the retired generation, they are actually very dynamic. And so we expect all those in the 60s to work until your 90s. And so we will learn from your wisdom, from your time, from your energy. And I feel that the energy from all of you is so contagious. And it is, and I think together we can actually build a better world and a world for peace. So thank you again for being here.